Hey y'all, today I'm going to be talking a little bit about 3D printing a strawberry pot, which is shown right here. I chose this project because my mom always grew succulents, specifically a succulent called Chicks and Hens, in a strawberry pot growing up, and it's something that I wanted, but I was not willing to pay the money for, so I decided to 3D print my own. I'm going to begin this video just talking a little bit about the design process. I use Tinkercad as my 3D software to design the pot, so let's get started.
What you're about to watch is a time lapse of the creation of the 3D file of the strawberry pot. I started with a sphere, which I then elongated. I used dimensions from the internet to create a ratio in order to have the correct width and height. I duplicated the spheroid so that I could use it later to create the hollow center. I then drug two whole squares onto my workspace and grouped them with my spheroid in order to cut the bottom and the top off the spheroid, creating the basic pot shape. I scaled down the duplicated spheroid shown in orange, switched it to whole, and grouped the objects to create a hollow center. After that, I used a tube to create the bottom of the pot. I reduced the radius of the interior hole in order to create a bottom with a small hole to drain water from. I then grouped this with my hollow spheroid. After that, I used a torus to create the lip on the top of the pot. I moved the torus to the same height as the pot and used an overhead view to make sure it looked about the same size as the pot opening. Next, I used a whole circle to create the spheroid needed to make the holes on the side of the pot. Once the hole looked correct size and height to me, I duplicated it 3 times. 2 of the duplications were used to make the adjacent holes in the top row. The other was used to create the lower set of holes. I knew I wanted the lower set to be larger, so I increased the scaling. Once I chose the height of this hole, I duplicated it 2 times to create the adjacent holes in the lower row. Next would prove to be the most difficult process of this whole build, which were the cups below the holes on the exterior portion of the pot. You're going to watch me fail miserably a few times because the curvature required for the cups to group with the pot without gaps was not easy to create. Additionally, I used 2 different size holes, so I had to create 2 different size cups. To save both your and my sanity, I sped this portion up. Here is the process that actually did end up working. First, I ungrouped the holes so that I could duplicate one of the upper and lower holes. I mentioned that the biggest problem was that the curvature of the cup had to match the curvature of the pot, so next I had to recreate my original pot shape so that I could match curvatures. I switched that recreation to whole and my duplicates of the original holes of the pot into solid. I used the recreated shape of the pot to cut the small spheroids, which would become the cups below the holes with the correct curvature. Once the cups were cut with the correct curvature, I cut the top of the spheroid off with a whole box. At this point, I basically had a quarter of a sphere. I then created a whole spheroid to cut out the interior of the shape, leaving what looked like half a cup. I did the same process for the lower levels. It is important to note that I didn't change the height of the spheroids as I worked, so that I wouldn't mix up the 2 different sizes of shapes I was working with. After this was complete, I scaled the cup up to make sure it was larger than the holes in the pot, and would create an adequate cup around each hole. I then duplicated the cup for the other 2 holes. I repeated this process for the bottom set of holes. It was a little finicky because I'm not perfect, so each hole is a little bit different size due to how far I inset them in the pot originally. I just made sure that it looked about right for each hole.
So after finishing my 3D file, it was time to print. I started by printing a little one about the size of my pinky because if anything was messed up, I wanted to make sure I could go back in and fix it before printing a larger one. So after the print was done, this is what it looked like with all its support material on it. I have since taken the support material off, and this is the little one, so it's about the size of my, about the size of my pinky. When it came out, this top torus actually wasn't connected, so I have super glued it since then. But I knew that I needed to fix that, so I went back in and I moved down the torus a few millimeters so that on the big ones that I was going to print next, that Taurus wouldn't be disconnected. So my next step was to print a bigger one, and I had two options. I could either print the biggest one I could print in the lab, which was 4 inches about, or I could go to the architecture school and try to print like a 10-inch one. And I just decided to print the 4-inch one because I didn't want to have to deal with going to the architecture school. So I set up the printer. It's going to take 10.5 hours. And first one comes out like this. So restart it. Second one comes out like this. And at this point, I'm like, all right, I've spent now like 22 hours printing and we have nothing. And it was my last ditch effort. I was going to switch machines. And so we switched machines and we finally got one complete. This is with all the support material pulled off and everything. The Taurus is connected. I didn't have to super glue this one, so it turned out exactly how I wanted to. The support material didn't come out all the way. In a lot of places, I think you can see here-ish, the support material is still kind of in there. So next, I used a file in my dad's shop to kind of file some of this down and get some more rounded, clear edges. Finished filing and painting and picking out plants and planting, and this is our final product. It looks pretty good. I'm pretty proud of it. I would say that this is a very tiny pot, and I'll be surprised if I can keep anything in here living. I'll probably have to rip all this out and plant it in different pots. But all in all, I think pretty successful. If I were to do this same pot again, I think I would make these lips about an inch wider. I just think there wasn't enough space in there for me to actually plant plants. I was like trying to shove things down in there. My fingers barely fit, so I think I would make those a little bit bigger. I did leave one slot open because there's possibility of adding an Arduino with a soil moisture probe to this project in the future. So I'm looking forward to possibly exploring that. But for now, this is my final product. Thanks.